Good morning. Welcome to the sermon from Old St Andrews, Montrose, for Sunday the 17th of January. Come and see. Invitations. Most of us like to receive invitations, and indeed often to give them. We've been limited in what invitations we've been able to both give and accept over the past 9 or 10 months. But already there is some light on the horizon, and I know some couples who've had to cancel their plans for their wedding because of COVID, sometimes more than once, are saying, "We are getting married this year, whatever." Let's hope that things are more normalised so that they will be able to have the wedding that they had hoped for. An invitation might prompt the question, what will I wear? But that's usually a problem that can be addressed, perhaps by borrowing something from a friend. Occasionally, an invitation might cause some difficulty due to strained relationships and the like, or because, unlikely recently, you have a prior engagement. But on the whole, invitations are both good to get and good to give. Hospitality may not be a universal human trait, but it's certainly a common one. I suspect that the constraints laid upon both the hospitality sector and upon the population as a whole this past while has been, apart from illness, bereavement and job loss, for many people, the most noticeable effect on life in 2020. Come to a Zoom meeting, frankly, just doesn't have the same appeal as joining someone for a face-to-face outing together. And it's understandable that we're hankering after that personal touch in 2021. I guess that there are some invitations which are, if not literally by royal command, maybe very hard to refuse. But for the most part, the response to invitations that we are likely to get are entirely voluntary. There are exceptions. There may be work dues that are part and parcel of your job, especially if it's to do with meeting clients. But most of us will feel that we're not under obligation to attend every social invitation we may receive. Of course, we wouldn't want to cause offence, but ultimately an invitation is just that. We are invited, and it's up to us to determine whether to accept or not, hopefully politely in any event. Come and see, ages ago. Early on in John's Gospel, we read of our patron St. Andrew instigating his brother Simon Peter's meeting with Jesus. Andrew may have been under the shadow of his brother, who was to come to the fore as Jesus' trusted lieutenant. But it all had to begin somewhere. And arguably, it began with a confession of faith from his less famous brother. "We have found the Messiah." And then he took Simon to Jesus. And then the next day, Philip is invited by Jesus to accompany him. And what does Philip do? He invites Nathanael. "We found the one whom Moses wrote about in the book of the law, and whom the prophets also wrote about. He's the son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael was rather doubtful. Can anything good come from Nazareth? But Philip persisted. "Come and see." Invitation is basic to human experience, and it's certainly an essential element in the growth of the gospel. Not forced conversions, not arm twisting to join the church or to commit to a creed or to vows, but at a much more basic level, come and see. Implicit in the invitation is a sense that the person inviting has something to offer, something that they've experienced, that they believe is worth having, and which they care enough about that they want those whom they they love, whom they are friends with, to invite to have it too. Of course, if our experience of faith and of Jesus is minimal, or if we have had bad experiences of church, then we're going to be less likely to feel confident in making any invitations of that kind at all. Mind you, it is important that we differentiate, because rejecting church is not the same as rejecting Jesus. And while we ought to do our level best to ensure that folks' experience of church is a positive one, really our invitation is not to come and see what church is like. Rather, it is to encourage people to respond to Jesus' invitation. We have to find ways of letting people meet Jesus. We want people to come and see Jesus. Come and see today. Of course, Andrew and Philip had the edge on us in many ways because they could invite their friends to meet Jesus in person, whereas we can't. So what can we do? Believing that Jesus is alive and risen and still with us, we've to look for opportunities to help people to meet with our risen Lord. It's not the same as inviting them to a meeting, to a wedding, to a picnic, or to an outing. It's not the same as inviting to a church service, though come time that might be a possibility. First off, we need to be convinced that Jesus is real and is known to us, and that we genuinely believe that it would be good for our friends to get to know him too. If we're not convinced of that ourselves, they're hardly likely to be convinced. We've to believe that Jesus is good news, that he's relevant, worthy, and that getting to know him would be worthwhile and positive. To that extent, we probably are working against some negativity among some older generations, and possibly against a sense of irrelevance among some of the younger generations. But just as you and I wouldn't be terribly enthused to accompany a friend to a concert if they had been banging on about the poor reviews that they read about it in the paper, so our friends are not going to pick up on come and see if we are doing the faith down. There have been some national church invitation initiatives in recent years with the likes of Back to Church Sundays, and I wouldn't knock them. There's a lot to be said for them. But as I said, I suspect we need something more personal than that as well. The Thy Kingdom Come prayer initiative at Pentecost that we've been part of the past couple of years encourages us to pray specifically for 5 friends or family members that they might come to know Jesus. It prompts us to live out our lives in a way that makes faith an attractive proposition to them. It alerts us to be on the lookout for interest from them and for us to be able to respond to that. Now, of course, it could be manipulative, but if done in the right way, it really shouldn't be. Of course, invitations, like any other, need to be appropriate, set in the context of some kind of meaningful friendship in most cases. Now, there is a place for what I call broadcast invitations, that is, to all and sundry. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Here we're speaking about one-to-one invitations, or maybe inviting a couple. What to? It might be to a Christian event, but it doesn't need to be, and it certainly doesn't need to be a service. Ideally, it would be to an engagement with other Christians, where folk can get to know people who have a faith in a non-threatening way, but where Jesus might be talked about, without it all being about faith, without faith being forced down anyone's throat, but where Jesus is part of people enjoying being together. And often that is where food is on the go. It was noticeable that as time went on, our messy church gatherings began to include dads, as well as mums and grandparents coming along with the children. Okay, we haven't had those face-to-face meetings for a while, but there was something that they were experiencing that made dads feel more comfortable at home with us. I've been encouraged at the ideas folk have been coming up with during the restrictions to spread their wings a bit, to extend invitations remotely. I was struck by the comment back from someone who delivered the messy church bags to youngsters, who said that one dad had asked jokingly, "Where's my bag?" But in a way that was him conveying a sense of being part of the outreach, part of the invitation, and that's good. And I think there's a wider lesson to be learned from that. Responses. Not every person who receives an invitation will respond positively. Not everyone will accept and come. That's true of any event, and it's true of any invitation to people to come and meet with Jesus. But our responsibility is to offer the invitation, to be encouraging, to demonstrate an ongoing interest in people, and to be genuine in our dealings with them. But we're not responsible for their response. So we need to be careful of using phrases like, "I don't want to spoil our friendship," "I can't handle rejection." It gets wearing when people say no. We need to set our friendships in context. Arm twisting and manipulation are certainly out. We're not forcing anyone to do anything they don't want to do. Yet if our friendship with Jesus is important to us, we can't go on pretending to our earthly friends that he isn't in the picture. A friend who is dear to us is most likely someone we'll want to introduce to our other friends. Christians who use social media have been more willing to like or share positive stories about their faith with friends. And we've had instances of many, many views and quite a few likes. I'm actually not too worried about the number. But it is encouraging when some of the positive good news stories emanating from Christians are seen by the wider community, and especially by those who wouldn't normally darken the doors of our churches. And even better, when these are well received. I know everyone isn't into social media, and it certainly can have its pitfalls, but I just use that as an example of how we can use invitation in its broader sense to reach out, particularly to younger people, in a non-threatening way. As restrictions are lifted, and as we become a bit more comfortable speaking to others face to face, let's be sure to find meaningful and respectful ways of inviting people to come and see Jesus. And I don't mean simply asking them to church. And remember, it is for their sake, it is for Jesus' sake, not because we are keeping score. Come and see. I'm glad Andrew and Philip did their bit. What's appropriate in our context? How might we help people to hear the 2021 equivalent of come and see Jesus? Thank you for joining us. May the Lord bless you. Amen.